Hey crew, Mark Hadmaker here. That's me. Let's talk a little. Is it combat related? Sure. Is it scoutcraft related? Yeah, absolutely. Is it survival related? Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about altitude hacks. We're talking about altitude, yes, changes in elevation. We also talk about how it can be conducive to training, and further down the road, we'll talk about how you can plan ambushes if you want to plan some of your backcountry trips. Here, all I want to do is take a couple of minutes to kind of give us some overall background and maybe dispel maybe some myths or explain what's going on when we get up there in elevation. Yes, as we increase in elevation, our lungs will have to work harder. It is not always necessarily, some indication of poor conditioning. In some cases it is, but they're working harder because the amount of oxygen being absorbed through the surface area of the lungs is greatly decreased. So anytime where, even if you just take a car trip up into elevation, you get out and it feels a little bit less. It feels thin out there. And why don't we feel that in the plane? Because they pressurize the cabins. They're not pumping extra oxygen in there. They're keeping everything pressurized, and that we're still allowing to get our lungs are able to still absorb, have a full load being absorbed through the surface area of the lungs. So basically, as we rise and there's less pressure, the molecules in the air they get further apart and less for us to pull in. So that's just a layman's dumb way to explain it. And I'm a layman dumb guy. There are ways to hack altitude conditioning to some degree. And that's what I wanted to discuss primarily today. And other than that, we will also discuss other hacks that come along with it, because there's also a whole lot about temperature differential that can just kill you if you're not paying attention. But you can do that with a little bit of tiny math in the head, and we'll get to that. One way to hack a little bit of altitude sickness is you can take a drug called Diamox, which actually gets ahead of you for altitude sickness. Just as like some people who get maybe a little bit queasy or seasick or air sick or car sick will take Dramamine pre-nausea. It's not one of those things like you take Dramamine after you're already seasick. Yeah, it's not a whole lot. You're trying to get in front of the whole thing. Some people will take Diamox for the altitude sickness to get ahead of it. Sure, you can do that, but here's the mechanism for how Diamox works, and also lets us know how we can kind of play this whole altitude game. Diamox will actually increase your passive respiration. So whenever this is actually an old school indigenous hack for many tribes, both here in the Americas, New Guinea, Himalayas, anywhere you go where you have indigenous tribes already live in these areas, ones that are having to move up and down through the elevation constantly, not the ones that necessarily over time have done some barrel-tested adaptation to it, and we're going to get to that down the road as well. By consciously choosing to overbreathe, it seems to be upping your passive respiration before you're really rising up into the heights, and also keeping it at a higher level. This can get in front of it. What I mean is there's a tendency for many of them, I've been with many people who are fit and will go on an adventure, and we get into elevation, and you can see people when you catch them out of the corner of their eye and they stop at the rest, they're kind of breathing a little bit when we're all kind of looking around passively each other. We want to be a bunch of badass dudes, and you kind of hold that back and act like you don't want to breathe extra hard. The thing is that that's actually the opposite tendency of what we want to do. We want to embrace that. We actually want to get in front of it. So as we're rising up in elevation, there's a tendency to go, phew, man, I'm having to breathe deeper. Yes, you are, because you're trying to pull in there and get fulfill this perceived lack in the surface area of the lungs. So as we're rising up, you want to breathe deeper and with a little bit more rapidity before you even get to that point where you feel the need to get it. And I mean, we're able to do this all the time. We do backcountry all the time at elevation and all this, and there's I often use audible breaths when I'm moving some of these things, just to remind myself to get in front of the whole thing. So increase so-called overbreathing and increase your passive respiration. And this exactly is the same mechanism that Diamox uses. It makes you increase your respiratory rate. So whenever you get out there, you're going to go, it's not some magic drug. It's just telling you to do what you can kind of hack yourself if you just get in front of it. Now, as far as what altitude sickness is, I've had it myself. Over 40% of people, around 40% of people are going to experience altitude sickness at some point, usually above 4,000 feet. The thing is, you don't know whenever it's coming on. Experienced climbers who are in this all the time, who have never suffered the effects, can have 1 to 2 bouts of it over the course of a lifetime. I've been in altitude many times. I've been hit with altitude sickness once. This is after, we'll say I've already had good 30, 40 trips into it. Whenever I got it, bam, it hit hard, that huge spiking headache and absolute nausea. Bad news. It makes you think, you wonder, am I wiped out? Can I never do this again? No. Next trip out, absolutely nothing. Every time out, sometimes there's always a little bit floating in the back of your head going, will this happen? No. You're going to stay in front of it. And that's why some of the tips I'm giving you, like the overbreathing, increase your passive respiration, all these things can help. The other thing that can help is also clearly you want to increase your conditioning, because improved conditioning is huge, because altitude will affect performance. It increases our work capacity. I mean, as altitude increases, our work capacity decreases. At around 7,000 meters, human work capacity drops 40%. Okay, that's 7,000. I mean, that's not too crazy, but it drops a good deal. So as we go up, so basically what you're wanting to do is, keep in mind, experienced climbers in some of the highest altitudes have recorded taking 30 minutes to cover how much distance? 100 yards. Why? It's because these people are hosses. They're completely tired at the time. That's just how much we degrade in performance as the altitude goes up. So if we want to hack into some of this, because we know your performance is going to degrade. It's not maybe, it is going to degrade. So wherever we live, if we live at sea level, we want, or any other altitude before we're going up, we want to increase our work capacity at those levels. We want to have good to great conditioning at whatever level we're at. So as we're going up, we know that as we're going to have degradation, at least we got a little bit of robustness to dig into. So the fitter you are at your particular elevation, as you increase in altitude, it's going to help, but don't keep thinking you're going to maintain this perfection. And that's why people are always surprised, why am I breathing more? And they get into this little ego head thinking I should probably try and act like I'm not breathing hard. And that's the exact opposite of what you do. So get your conditioning at sea level, and then give yourself your fake Diamox, become a good indigenous individual, and start breathing deeper and more audibly as you're increasing. So the hack is, and there, get in front of, stay on top of your conditioning, and overbreathe as you're moving up. And keep in mind, if at sea level, whatever elevation you're walking around in right now, if you're already breathing hard in everyday life and small tasks leave you over breath, and you're thinking about, I'm also going to take a vacation up here, even just a car ride, you're going to suffer for that, my friends. You got to get in front of this thing. So conditioning is always going to be your best friend. Now, we can become adapted to elevation over time and not even have to stay in front of it with this overbreathing hack, but it takes time. It usually is 10 days to 2 weeks at a new elevation allows you to become adapted. You're still not moving to 100%, but you're increasing, you're getting closer to whatever your sea level or your standard elevation is to how you feel. But there's 3 things to keep in mind. One, the adaptation process does take time, and we can hack it temporarily with the overbreathing we've discussed, and or having good conditioning before we get there. 2, the adaptation is altitude specific. This means that if you have superior uptake in your oxygen level at lower altitudes, we also think that, this is, I mean, if we train at a particular altitude, that means if I train at a mile high, and then I go down to sea level, my conditioning is going to be greater at sea level. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't. So you want good conditioning, yes, but it doesn't confer an extra benefit moving from this sparse this environment to the lower one. But it does help in the environment you're going to be in. So if you're in that, if you've got a fight coming up, and it is elevation, it's wise to get there ahead of time, at least 10 days to 2 weeks. And to train that environment to get used to what that feels like. But thinking it confers a particular benefit by going down, it doesn't necessarily do that. If that were the case, I think we would see more Sherpas and mountaineers crushing marathons because they're used to the altitude. They come down and think, it's like a breeze. No, it confers benefits at a specific altitude. But there is a side effect to altitude adaptation. Part of it is, yes, we're over-breathing, and we'll come a point where we get adapted to what's going on there. When we stop over-breathing with it, and you realize, hey, I'm feeling pretty good, I'm not breathing as hard whenever I'm out here, we think it's because we've grown extra capacity for the lungs to pull in things, we've gained more surface area. Actually, no, what we've done is we've increased the viscosity of the blood itself. The viscosity is actually the viscosity of the blood is referred to as the hematocrit it's how much the packed cell volume it is. So by this increased capacity, this increased packing, this increased mass, this is what's allowing us to have a better delivery to this oxygen transfer as it moves through the system. But see, this increased viscosity of the blood is actually eats energy as well. So there's a trade-off of, so we can breathe less, but the heart actually start pumping a little harder and a little more to force this increased viscosity, the hematocrit, throughout the body. So we got to keep in mind increased adaptation does not necessarily lead to overall increased performance. We're going to have an increased performance if we get adapted to it, but it's just this one, maybe the lungs are working less hard, but actually the circulatory system is working, that goes up. So there's always these little bit of trade-offs going on. So don't think that's part of the reason we're thinking about, well, why don't the marathoners, the mountaineers and Sherpas come down here and crush it down here. These trade-offs are happening all the time. So we got to keep that in mind, that one way to get adapted to it is we got to increase this viscosity of the blood. The heart's going to be pumping harder, so there's still going to be some work going on. And that's the other reason that no matter where there's always going to be somewhat of a caloric deficit whenever you're at altitude, particularly if it gets cold. I'm going to kind of cut it off there, but kind of give you an idea of some of the, in the weeds, the background of what we're looking at as we move forward through it. But also when we're going to, from here, we're going to start getting to Scoutcraft, where we can start eyeballing and knowing how much overbreathing you're going to do, what the, how you're going to, maybe you get to, one glance at a mountain and tell you, like, oh, we're going to need a sweater on this one. We don't need a sweater on this one. Oh, this is how this is going to be. Or don't even climb this one now. Everything can look nice and serene. This is going to kick your butt whenever you get there because of the temperature differential or the katabatic or adiabatic wind effects. Anyway, all this information is coming from a book we're putting out there, and also an instructional series on old school Scoutcraft. Because just like we do our old fight material over at www.extremeselfprotection.com, where everything's all about old school fighting, old school combat, rough and tumble days, got all this stored house material of how the scouts and the mountain man and thought moved, and then we kind of just go back and overlay the science on it so we can understand what was going on, what was being understood intuitively by them, and at least we can also shoot it through the lens of 21st century science and go, that's interesting, we can have some backup for what's happening here, and it's absolutely the knowledge and the wisdom that was already going on is absolutely gorgeous. And again, we'll be putting that in an upcoming volume. But this kind of teases it and gives us a prerequisite to it. And also, I just love this stuff. Hopefully you got something out of this as well. Here comes my thumb.